Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe. We're going to present you with another podcast from Go Unify. This is episode number 3, and I know this is pretty early stages for us, but we're trying to put good content out there for you guys. So if you like it and you appreciate it would mean a lot for us if you hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and so that we can continue to put more stuff out for you. Now, today's topic is going to be about traveling and the impact that traveling has on us and on our inner well-being. One thing is for sure that since the pandemic, a lot of us have not been able to do the one thing that we thoroughly enjoy, and that is traveling, right? Exploring new places, whether it's with friends or by ourselves. A lot of people enjoy traveling alone, and needless to say that traveling does expand our consciousness. So I do believe that it has a lot of benefits, and I myself am also pretty upset that I'm not able to do this since the pandemic broke out. Let's speak about it. I'll share my thoughts, and you guys comment below on how you feel about it as well. All right. Well, let me start off by saying this: that my wife and I we stay in Singapore, and one of the advantages, or one of the things that Singapore has to offer is its proximity to all these other cool Asian countries within few hours of flight distance. The kind of thing that when you're from the West, you wouldn't take for granted, right? Because when you want to go party, or maybe go visit Thailand or Vietnam or Philippines, or let alone just India, that in itself puts a huge budget. You definitely break your wallet trying to organize that vacation. Not to mention that taking time off work, the whole traveling part, about 48 hours, sometimes it could be 48-hour trip just to get to the destination, let alone taking time off work to plan your schedule around this vacation. So being in Singapore, I felt like that was one thing I would be able to take an advantage of, and sometimes it's how life plays out. And the minute I get here, and I think I got here early this year, and before I knew it, I know we managed to make a couple of trips, but before we knew, the pandemic broke out, and we were in Singapore. And Singapore is pretty small, right? You could compare it to the size of Toronto, because it really is like a city, and so not being able to travel, you're literally stuck within a city. That's a tough thing to do, especially knowing that you're within proximity to some of the amazing countries all around you, and that's a tough thing to deal with. And I'm sure a lot of you guys out there you're also experiencing something similar, if not exactly the same, right? A lot of us are not going to be able to be home for Christmas this year, or New Year's, and that's a tough thing, because regardless of where we stay, a lot of times the whole family is not within the same locality. A lot of times we are living abroad, or in a different state, or a different province, a different city, and you're not able to see your family every single day, let alone every once a month. And we look forward to times like Christmas and New Year's and Diwali and other festivals to meet up with the family, and that's something we weren't able to do this year around, and that was tough. It was pretty tough for me. I'm sure it was tough for you. So I definitely hope that things get better, so that we can start traveling, moving around, because I would love to get back on the road again, and feel what it feels like to explore new places. Well, that's enough rambling from me. I'm going to jump right into this podcast. We're calling this a traveling nomad. And you may ask, well, what do you mean by a traveling nomad? Because a nomad obviously travels. Well, a traveling nomad, in my opinion, is a visitor who feels at home. An inner explorer in us all wants to experience the state of mind. There's an innate feeling in us to explore the rest of the world. It is a desire to see what is out there. But are there any real benefits of traveling? I'm sure we all see people on social media that are blogging and talking and posting photos of them traveling around the world. But in this podcast, I want to answer the question from my own personal experience, whether there are any actual real benefits of traveling. Because honestly, it seems like it's become a trend now to just post photos of oneself in a foreign land, and where we we are accustomed to believe that just traveling alone expands your consciousness and increases your experience. But is that really true? And could you just take your phone around all over the world and just take selfies and expect that same kind of impact to have on your consciousness as you did if you were really trying to accustom yourself within your environment? I, for one, have done my fair share of traveling around the world, and I could consider myself a traveling nomad at this point. But for me, it was a little different because I actually had to spend time in whichever location that I went to rather than just going there for a vacation. And therefore, a lot of times I didn't really get the feel of a tourist when I traveled. And instead, and over time, of course, I felt like a part of that place. It's like having bits and pieces of my life in different locations over the years that come back to me as I sit here and discuss this with you. Now, this is something that I'm sure we've all experienced, and it's natural to find yourself in whenever you find yourself in an unfamiliar place, it takes a bit of time getting used to. And to begin with, the food, for instance, is unfamiliar. Oftentimes languages are different. People's behaviors are not the same as they are back home. And last but not least, the climate tends to vary. And you're not always well prepared, regardless of how much you've read online about a particular location or place or country. And as we navigate through our time in this unfamiliar place, we begin to notice the kind of thing that we as human beings oftentimes take for granted while living in motherland, regardless of where you're from. When you migrate to a new place, even if it's for a short period of time, your mind begins to compare it to back home. And it's inevitable that this leads to disappointment and complaints, because this is what the mind is good at. Finding flaws and always comparing has become our innate nature. But gradually, one begins to settle in and learn about other cultures and acknowledge it, and acknowledge the similarities as well as the differences. For instance, when I came to Singapore, the one thing that I had a hard time getting over was the way people spoke. And no disrespect, but I felt like they were butchering the English language. They have their own way of speaking English. They call it Singlish. And for the longest time, I couldn't even get my mind across it. And I felt like, well, what's going on here? Why are they, so adamant at speaking the way they speak? And that was arrogant of me. That was ignorant of me because I immediately started comparing it to motherland and how people spoke back home. And it was inevitable that led to more comparison and then complaints and a level of disappointment, which wasn't even really necessary, because regardless of where you're from, when you go to a new place, you can't expect people to speak the way they spoke back home. They're not from there, right? And so that takes time. But naturally, over time, you start to become more familiar with the place, and you begin to notice the kind of things that when you're back home you take for granted are not really that common in this new place. And so getting back to the point of what happened with me was that over time I became more comfortable with the unknown as I traveled to new places and different destinations for work-related or honestly life-related reasons. I just had to be there. It took me a while. Even as far as when I spent time in USA, I felt like there was a certain level of ignorance that I found in people over there, and I was like, well, in Canada people are a lot more humble, but I shouldn't even have made that a comparison to begin with, because they're not from there, right? And so they have their own cultural values that they grew up with. They obviously learned their behavior from their older generation or their surroundings, and that's natural for them. So anything that's natural to them is gonna seem foreign to you when you go to a new place. Anyways, moving on. So here are a few things that I personally felt happened to me from traveling and living in various places over time. Well, for one, my sense of identity became more flexible, as I felt more inclined towards identifying as a human being rather than a particular nationality. I also got to experience and appreciate local food as well as local coffee that were always considered international in motherland. Inevitably, I collected different currencies naturally because you need money regardless of where you are. Now, this thing is interesting because this happened every time I went to a new place, and over time, it was inevitable that I lost myself and then I found myself. And this happened every time, numerous times, every time when I traveled to a new place. And like I said, this one takes a bit of time because until you accept your current state, city, or place, you will always remain a stranger. And acceptance takes time. Moving on, the other thing that traveling helped me with was it enhanced my creativity. Now, Plato once said that necessity is the mother of invention, and I agree from first-hand experience. In other words, if you want something, you gotta want it bad, bad enough for it to become a necessity, and only then you will go after it wholeheartedly. Last but not least, I also quenched my thirst of traveling, and I truly felt like a traveling nomad, a visitor who feels or who felt at home, because after a while, this becomes home, even though it's not home. In the end, after experiencing these exotic islands, unforgettable beaches, alluring mountains, this one is funny, but bad customer service, plenty of air travel, being at different airports, and multiple stamps on my passport, I believe that traveling does have many benefits, but there are two ways of traveling. One is to travel as a tourist, and the other is to travel as a nomad. The intention of discovering a new culture with open arms expands human consciousness. To get to know a place takes more than a few days or weeks, and I personally think it takes time. Anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up over here. If you like it, if you can relate to it, regardless of where you are in the world, I would love to hear from you. And wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year if we don't speak again. And hopefully we could try to keep the negativity out of our minds. I know it's tough, especially if you're living by yourself. But just remember that if you want to catch up with me, if you just need somebody to speak to, I'm always here, only a phone call away, or just message me, and I'll be more than happy to just catch up with you to see how you're doing. Rest assured, we're doing fine out here in Singapore, but we can't wait till we're back home. Anyways, that's it for me, guys. This is Ankit from Go Unified. This episode was called The Traveling Nomad, a visitor who feels at home. I hope you liked it. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.